All right, so our next topic is acids and bases, and you've probably heard these terms in other courses in pop culture, that kind of thing. But the question is, do you actually know what an acid or a base is? So let's take a look at it. Acids and bases are all based off of H plus. So if we think about what H plus is, we have to think about what hydrogen is, right? Just regular H. If you think about what hydrogen is, it has one proton, and then it generally doesn't have any neutrons, and then it has one electron. And so when we make H plus, what we do is we remove that electron, and what we're left with is just a proton. Right, so sometimes you'll hear it be called H plus, other times you'll hear it called a proton. And the reason that this proton is so important and special is that it's basically just a proton, right? No other element becomes just a proton when you remove the electron. And so it's relatively reactive and does some special things. And so it gets the special name of acid. And then something that takes it is a base. So again, let's just review an acid. We're going to define as something that donates H plus in solution. Right, so it's going to give up a proton. It's a big molecule, and somehow it's going to eject out an H plus, a proton. And then the base is just the opposite of this. It's just going to accept that H plus. So if you have any protons flowing around in solution and you add a base, it's going to take up that H plus. Let's take a look at an example reaction. Here we have HCl plus H2O going into H3O plus a Cl minus. And so what we want to do here is identify the acid and the base. The first step is we want to take a look at the left side of the reaction. That's what we're going to label our acid and our base. So label the left side. And then we're going to identify one as the acid and one as the base. So the acid is going to give the H plus. It's going to give part of itself up, and that part is H plus. And so if you think about this logically, it's going to lose H plus. And since it's losing a positive charge, it becomes more negative. So for example, on this left side, we have HCl, and on the right side, it becomes Cl minus, right? So it became more negative, it lost an H plus, that is the acid. And then in turn, the base is what accepts the H plus, right? It gets the H plus, and so it's going to become more positive. So if we think about this side, we have H2O, and then over here we have H3O plus, right? So H2O became H3O plus. The difference between those two is an H plus. So that's the base. Right, so again, HCl to H or to Cl minus, right? It lost or donated the H plus. Right, so that's an acid. And then the water went from being H2O to H3O plus. It accepted that H plus. And then later on, we're going to call this blue part the conjugate acid, and this purple part the conjugate base. We'll go in deeper detail in the next video, but just a little preview there. And then if you think about what's going on in the reaction, so if you get to organic chemistry, we take a look at reaction mechanisms. And in reaction mechanisms, we actually kind of explain how all of these reactions happen. It's, in my opinion, the funnest part of chemistry. Unfortunately, it's kind of locked behind the organic chemistry route. So if we think about these mechanisms, right, which you would learn in OChem if you take that course eventually, we have an HCl, which looks something like this. We have an OH or H2O that looks like something like that. And then what we form is an H3O plus, and a Cl minus. So if we think about how those form, basically what happens is one of the lone pairs from the oxygen grabs that hydrogen, and so the electrons go from being a lone pair to now being a bond, right? It's creating that bond. And then what else happens is this HCl bond breaks, and the electrons in that bond then become a lone pair on the chlorine. And so you can see how the acid right here, it's giving up the H plus, the base is going in and taking the H plus. We won't do mechanisms in this course. I just want to give you a little preview of OChem if you have to take it. Overall, acids and bases get complicated, especially when you're learning them from the first time, because there's some background knowledge that you're not going to have that's kind of required to truly understand acids and bases. So this is just kind of an introduction to acids and bases. And if you still have questions, feel free to stop by office hours, but understand that some of it might not make sense until you have some higher level knowledge. So if you're asking yourself, well, what do I need to know to be able to be successful in the course? Of course, take a look at your work along and homework checks. That'll kind of guide you in terms of what you 100% have to know for the course.